Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get a couple 5-0s with in the new constructed events. So this is a deck that I've run through 4 of the new constructed events with, and I've gone 5-0 twice and 4-1 twice, so the deck's been performing really well for me. Speaking of the new constructed events, I think going forwards I'm going to be splitting my time between ladder and the events, because the events feel really competitive to me, and I'm also going to be trying something new out for this video. Normally I only post 2 or 3 matches, along with the deck tech, but since the new constructed events have just released, I'm going to be posting a full 5-match constructed event. So if you like the additional gameplay and you want me to do that going forwards, definitely let me know in the comments. And on the flip side, if you think the video is too long and you would rather me only post 2 or 3 matches going forwards, let me know in the comments below as well, and I'll try and gauge the reaction of what people want. Now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description that will have the deck list there if you just want to import it into Arena and try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also working on a full text article for this deck on MTG zone that will have more details on the deck, a full sideboard guide, and how I would change the deck for best of 1 as well. So as soon as that goes up, I'll link that down in the description if you want to have a read of that. So anyway, with that out of the way, this is my red-black Nixilis Transmogrify deck in Historic. And this is basically an anvil-based sacrifice deck that also uses Transmogrify as a way to give the card a combo finish, and utilising the new Nixilis Planeswalker as well. So, the really nice thing about this deck is that it has all the strengths of the sacrifice shell, but also Transmogrify provides a nice combo burst, which first of all, makes it very difficult for the opponent to interact with what you're doing, because the answers you need for the sacrifice stuff and Transmogrify into Serra's Emissary both require completely different answers, so it's very difficult for the opponent to attack the deck on 2 different fronts. Secondly, it also solves one of the biggest problems with the sacrifice decks in Historic, and I think the biggest weakness of sacrifice decks is that they take a long time to close the game out, which makes them naturally weak to control and combo decks. And using Transmogrify to cheat Serra's Emissary into play, not only does it shut off damage-based combo decks like Greasefang from being able to win the game, but it also helps you close out the game a lot quicker, which improves the matchups against control and combo, which are typically the only 2 bad matchups for the sacrifice decks. Additionally, with the new Nixilis Planeswalker, that's another card that helps shore up control, which is probably the worst matchup for sacrifice. You know, control is typically great against the sacrifice decks because of cards like Divine Purge and Farewell, and Nixilis dodges both of them. Transmogrify also dodges Divine Purge as well, so I feel like this particular build, not only does it make the bad matchups much better, but it also makes a lot of the matchups that were already decent even better as well, because having access to Serra's Emissary against a deck like Phoenix or Auras makes an already good matchup even more difficult for them to win. Another nice addition for this deck is that it doesn't get hosed by Hidetsugu Consumes All. I feel like this was a card that was keeping the sacrifice decks in check, because in my opinion, in Historic, I feel like the top 3 decks right now are Sacrifice, Phoenix and Arcanist, and I feel like the sacrifice decks naturally have a pretty good matchup against both Phoenix and Arcanist. Now, they were using Hidetsugu Consumes All to keep the sacrifice decks in check, specifically the Luris-based green-black versions, but this deck doesn't really get hurt by Hidetsugu Consumes All at all. You know, since we're running Anvil, which is a 2-mana card, Nixilis and Transmogrify into Serra's Emissary, Hidetsugu Consumes All basically does nothing against our list, which then makes the Arcanist and Phoenix matchups much better again. And finally, one really nice thing about this deck is that it doesn't really get hurt by Graveyard Hate at all, which is really big considering how popular it is in the format. So I've been really high on this list, and I think it could potentially be the best deck in the format right now. So anyway, let's start having a look at the cards. First of all, we're going to have a look at the namesake card, Transmogrify. So this is a 4-mana sorcery. We exile target creature, and then that creature's controller goes through their deck until they hit a creature and they put it into play. So the idea with this is that we use it on our own creature tokens in order to cheat Serra's Emissary into play. So we can create creature tokens off only Cult Anvil, which is the main way we'll be doing it, but we also get tokens off Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Nixilis as well. So the idea is, get one of these creature tokens into play, cast Transmogrify on it, and then we get Serra's Emissary into play. So Serra's Emissary, 7/7 flying, and as it enters the battlefield we choose a card type, and us and our creatures both have protection from the chosen card type. So what it means by card type here is, for example, creature, instant, sorcery, artifact, enchantment, etc. And this is super powerful especially naming creature, because if you get this into play and you name creature, it basically means that both you and your creatures take no damage from the opponent's creatures, which means they can't deal any damage to you via attacking. It means you can freely block their creatures and your creatures won't die. And most importantly, it also means that they can't block any of your creatures, which is really important at being able to close the game out quickly. Because one of the big strengths of Emissary is not only does it lock the opponent out from attacking if you name creature, but it also means that you can attack freely and close the game out pretty quickly. And as opposed to most Emissary decks, this deck is even better at closing the game out because we're naturally going to be dealing damage to the opponent through Anvil and of Nixilis anyway, so it often means that we can kill with the Emissary in just 2 swings. We're not always going to be naming creature though. A lot of the time we'll be naming instant or sorcery if that's what we expect the opponent to have. You know, specifically against a deck like Phoenix, for example, their main way of killing Emissary will be stuff like Unholy Heat. So if we have access to 2 Transmogrifies or a Transmogrify and a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, we can often just name instant on the first Emissary to shut off their removal, and then with the second Transmogrify we can just get another one in play naming creature. Or we can also copy the Emissary with the reflection of Kiki Jiki off the back of Fable of the Mirror Breaker to get a second one into play naming creature. So we can, if we're not under immediate threat from creatures, name what we think the most common interaction will be from the opponent, and then get a second Emissary in play naming creature, and that will usually be good enough to lock the game out. So Emissary is really strong at the moment, especially game 1, because a lot of decks will have access to ways to kill Emissary game 1, but they're typically run in very low numbers. So for example, the food decks will be running Mortality Spear, but that's typically only as a one-of. The Arcanist decks occasionally run 1 Bedevil or a low number of Bloodchief's Thirst. The Auras decks, for example, will be running 1 or 2 Heliod's Punishment. So these common decks will have ways to kill the Emissary, but if we just get an Emissary into play on turn 4 naming creature, we can turn the corner and close the game out quick enough that it doesn't give them enough time to find their answers to it. Now obviously, especially games 2 and 3, a lot of decks will have different ways to interact with the Emissary, which is why we have different creatures in the sideboard as a replacement for it going into games 2 and 3, but I'll talk about them in a bit more detail when we get into the sideboard. But Emissary is super strong right now, and it just gives the deck a completely different angle of attack and helps close the game out a lot quicker. So then the other half of the deck is kind of built around only Cult Anvil and of Nixilis. So Anvil, 2 mana artifact, and whenever 1 or more of our artifacts leave the battlefield during our turn, we get a 1/1 token, and then we can tap it and sacrifice an artifact to drain the opponent for 1. So the idea with this is we're trying to just consistently generate 1/1 tokens off this every turn. We have a lot of artifacts to enable the Anvil, and just generating artifacts and draining the opponent out is very effective. Against control decks, we can just get a steady supply of 1/1 tokens that we can pressure the opponent and their planeswalkers with. Against the aggressive decks, we can just produce a bunch of tokens in order to block and stabilize. And against the mid-range decks, just having a steady supply of tokens is very useful there as well. And the ability to drain the opponent out means that we'll be gradually killing the opponent over the course of the game anyway. So like I said, we've got a bunch of artifacts to enable the Anvil that we can feed to it in order to start generating the tokens. So we've got 4 Implement of Combustion, 2 Sideboard Lantern, and 4 Terrarion. So particularly Terrarion and Implement of Combustion are in here very specifically to enable Anvil on turn 2, so we can play these on turn 1, then on turn 2 play the Anvil, sacrifice the Implement or the Terrarion to the Anvil itself, drain the opponent for 1, get a 1/1, and then we also get to draw a card off the Implement and Terrarion, so they immediately replace themselves as well. And now Soul Guide Lantern, we can feed to the Anvil. Typically we won't want to do that, and like I said, the important thing with Anvil is we don't need to use its ability in order to get the token. As long as an artifact leaves the battlefield, it triggers it. So we could, for example, sacrifice a treasure token that we get off Deadly Dispute or Fable to trigger it and get a token. Even using Transmogrify on one of our 1/1 tokens replaces itself because that still counts as an artifact leaving the battlefield. So with Soul Guide Lantern, for example, we typically don't just want to sacrifice it to the Anvil. We can just wait a turn and then sacrifice it to exile the opponent's graveyard, or sacrifice it to draw a card so it replaces itself, and we still get the 1/1 token off the Anvil as well. So in terms of Implement and Terrarion themselves, their individual abilities aren't that strong, but it does come up occasionally. So for example, Implement of Combustion, the ability to deal 1 damage to a Planeswalker is actually pretty relevant against control, because it means the opponent, if we have one of these on the battlefield, the opponent can't just go to Fairy and freely minus it to take out our only creature, because we can then just use the implement to pick it off. And specifically Narset is another card that we kind of struggle to deal with as well, and we do want to be drawing off Deadly Dispute and Fable of the Mirror Breaker, so Narset on board can be problematic. So if they minus Narset twice, we can just use the Implement of Combustion to finish it off as well. So against control, this can be useful in some situations. And then Terrarion, typically in a vacuum, is the better of the two because it cycles essentially for free. We pay 2 mana to generate 2 mana when we sacrifice it, but it can come up that we can use it to hardcast the Serra's Emissary. If we have Terrarion alongside a treasure token from Deadly Dispute or Fable of the Mirror Breaker, we can sacrifice the Terrarion to make 2 white, then sacrifice one of the treasures to make the 3rd white that we need to cast Serra's Emissary, which has come up a few times. So if you've got an Emissary in hand, definitely consider that play, because even hard casting a Serra's Emissary can be good enough in a lot of situations. And then Soul Guide Lantern, like I said, it is a good enabler for Anvil, but just having main deck Graveyard Hate is really useful right now, because a lot of the decks that are interacting with the Graveyard are more heavy on their interactions game 1, which means that you can sort of catch them off guard with the Graveyard Hate. In specific, it's really important against Phoenix as well, because typically the way Phoenix decks will kill Serra's Emissary if you name creature is with multiple Unholy Heats. If they can get Delirium online, their Unholy Heats are dealing 6 damage, so all they need is 2 Unholy Heats or an Unholy Heat and a Pillar of Flame to kill the Emissary. But if we have Soul Guide Lantern alongside Emissary, we can use the Lantern to exile the opponent's graveyard at instant speed, which turns their Unholy Heats from doing 6 damage into 2. So Lantern plus Emissary is a really strong way of just closing the game out against the Phoenix decks. Then we've also got 4 copies of Deadly Dispute, which is really nice because it gives us really useful ways to use our Implement and Terrarion even when we don't have the Anvil, because if we sacrifice one of these 2 to the Deadly Dispute, we get to draw 2 and create a treasure, but we also get to draw an additional card off these, so they get to replace themselves. And just drawing 2 cards and creating a treasure is beneficial anyway. The treasure token can also trigger the Anvil later in the game. Then the new Nixilis Planeswalker. So this card is really strong, and I feel like this is the best home for it because it has really good synergy with both the Anvil game plan and the Transmogrify game plan. So 3 mana Planeswalker with Casualty, and first of all it gives us something really useful to do with the tokens that we get off Anvil or Fable of the Mirror Breaker, because we can just immediately sacrifice them to the Nixilis in order to put the second Planeswalker into play. Once we have 2 Planeswalkers in play, the +1 ability, the Punisher ability if you will, is really strong in this deck because we're naturally going to be dealing a lot of chip damage with the Anvil, which means if we just keep upticking the Nixilis, it will get to a point where the opponent's life total is under enough pressure that they have to start discarding cards, which is when you get the real value off this. The fact that Nixilis can also create tokens is really nice as well, because even if we don't have Anvil or Fable of the Mirror Breaker, if we have a Transmogrify, we can simply just play an Nixilis on turn 3 and then minus it to create a token which we can use Transmogrify on. So Nixilis is great because it's both a payoff for creating tokens as well as being able to create tokens itself to make sure that we can always cast Transmogrify. And the other, like I spoke about earlier, the other really nice thing about Nixilis is that it really improves the control matchup, which was kind of the only bad matchup in the format. Like I said, the 2 main weaknesses of Sacrifice are combo and control, and outside of Greasefang and maybe the Heliod deck, which I don't think is particularly good right now, there really isn't much combo in the format, so the main thing keeping Sacrifice in check is control, and I think Nixilis goes a lot way to make that matchup better as well. Then obviously you got the -7, the ultimate on this as well, which hasn't come up for me at all, but being able to threaten this in grindy matchups is a big deal because it means the opponent can't just ignore it. You know, say you're against a deck like Food, for example, where they can gain enough life that the +1 they can just keep affording to take the damage off it. Eventually they'll have to deal with it because allowing you to draw 7 cards off the ultimate is a really big deal. And then we've also got Fable of the Mirror Breaker here, which is another really generically powerful card that synergizes really well with what the rest of the deck is trying to do. So 3 mana, and then on the first chapter we get a 2/2 token that creates a treasure when it attacks. So first of all, the 2/2 token that we create is a target for Transmogrify to get Serra's Emissary into play. The treasure token that it can create can either ramp us, but it also triggers Anvil, which is really nice. And then the second chapter, we can discard and draw 2, which first of all is just really nice at helping it to dig for our combo pieces, our Anvil, our Nixilis, or our Transmogrify. make sure that we keep hitting land drops, and it's also a good way to discard Ceres Emissaries if we draw them, you know, because otherwise they can, if we don't have Terrarium, they can just sort of sit in our hand uncastable, so we can loot them away with the second chapter. And then the third chapter, it turns into a reflection of Kiki Jiki. So first of all, we can target that with the Transmogrify to get Ceres Emissary into play, but like I said earlier, we can also use it to copy Ceres Emissary, providing we don't name creature or enchantment. If we name creature or enchantment with the Emissary, then we can't copy it because it will have protection from the reflection of Kiki Jiki. But if, like I said for example earlier, we name instant against Phoenix, we can make a copy of Ceres Emissary naming creature and then attack in, or even against a deck like Control, you know, typically I'll name Planeswalker against Control, but if we have a Fable of the Mirror, a reflection of Kiki Jiki, sorry, on the battlefield, we can then copy the Emissary naming instant in response to an instant speed removal, for example. So the ability to copy Emissary when we don't name creature or enchantment is a really powerful endgame off this card as well. Then onto the mana base. Oh, sorry, I forgot Fatal Push, my bad. Fatal Push as well is just really nice removal in the deck. You know, we do need early interaction, even though we can Transmogrify into Emissary, which is usually good enough against a lot of the creature decks. Having access to this is really important, especially against a deck like Auras. And in this deck specifically, we can trigger Revolt very easily because we can sacrifice all of our artifacts at instant speed, we can use Anvil at instant speed, and Deadly Dispute, so turning on Revolt is very easy for this deck, so it just works as really good efficient removal. Then onto the mana base. I'm running 23 lands in this deck, which has felt like a good amount. Obviously we want to be able to cast Transmogrify on curve as often as possible. We do have a lot of ways to draw to make sure that we do that consistently. You know, we can sacrifice all of our artifacts to draw cards, we can draw off Deadly Dispute, and the looting off Fable of the Mirror Breaker is really good at making sure that we keep hitting land drops as well. In terms of the actual lands themselves, we've got the 12 good black-red dual lands here. I'm not running Dragon Skull Summit because we're not running enough swamps or mountains to make it enter untapped often enough. 2 Hive of the Eye Tyrant and 2 Den of the Bugbear have been absolutely fantastic at giving us something to do when we do flood out, allowing us to pressure Planeswalkers, especially after Wrath effects, and just being able to get additional damage in as well. Hive is great as additional graveyard hate, which is especially good against stuff like Croxa, and Den of the Bugbear being able to create tokens is very nice, especially with Transmogrify as well, so the creature lands pull a lot of weight in this deck. Then single Takenuma and single Sokenzan, the first copies of which are both basically free in the deck. Takenuma's not that great here, but we can use it to rebite of Nixilis. But Sokenzan is actually really good at being able to create tokens that we can Transmogrify. And then we've got a single copy of Castle Lochthwain as well. Now, because we're only running 4 Blood Crypt and 2 Swamp, this is going to enter tapped a lot of the time, but this has been so good in matchups where it comes up. You know, especially in grindy matchups like against Arcanist. If you're both going down to top decking, you having access to Castle Lochthwain to draw an additional card every turn is going to just make you pull ahead so quickly. And the life loss off it is kind of negligible because we can drain the opponent out with Anvil as well. And then finally we've got a couple of Swamp and a couple of Mountain to round out the mana base. So that's the main deck. Like I said, I've been so impressed with this deck in general. I feel like it goes a long way to solve the few weaknesses that the sacrifice decks did have, and just attacking from a completely different angle is so strong. Now onto the sideboard. I'm going to start out by talking about the creatures we've got here. So we've got 3 Endrace Forerunners and 3 Ulamog. So these are basically just swaps for Ceres Emissary in matchups where the Emissary isn't that great. Like I said, Emissary is pretty good game 1 against almost everything. It can be a bit sketchy against Control because it dies to their Wrath of God effects, and it's also kind of difficult to know what to name. Typically I'll name Planeswalker, but they could have just a Fateful Absence to kill it. So, but in most other matchups, post sideboard is where they'll have access to different types of removal. Game 1 they typically won't have that much, but there are certain matchups, for example like Arcanist, Green Black Food, or 5 Color Niv, where, you know, games 2 and 3 the food deck will have a high density of Bone Shards and Mortality Spear, so it's hard to know whether to name sorcery, instant or creature. Against Arcanist they'll have access to more Bedevils and Bloodchief Stir, so same deal. And against a deck like 5 Color Niv, they'll have, you know, Maelstrom Pulse as sorcery, Vanishing Verse as instant, Binding the Old Gods as an enchantment. So in matchups like that, Emissary, especially games 2 and 3, won't necessarily get it done. So first of all, we've got Ulamog here, and this is here kind of for those 3 matchups I just talked about. Basically any slower deck, you know, any deck that's not immediately pressuring our life total so that we can actually afford to attack with the Ulamog, but decks that don't have good removal for it. So for example, against the food decks, They're a deck that doesn't kill you particularly quickly, but all of their interaction other than Meathook Massacre is destruction based, you know, and obviously the opponent's never going to get a Meathook Massacre for 10-10 unless you're really unlucky. So getting this into play, the food deck isn't going to be able to kill it. Since they're not killing you very quickly, you can afford to get multiple attacks in with this, and then you can exile their whole deck basically. Same thing against Arcanist, all of their interaction is destruction based, so we can get this down, attack, exile their whole deck, and same thing with 5 Colour Niv as well, you know. They do have, sometimes they're running the 4-mana Teferi Time Raveler, which can be pretty brutal, but other than that, they basically have no way to kill this. So Ulamog is basically here for any deck that doesn't kill you quickly and doesn't have good ways to kill it. We can just use the Ulamog to exile the opponent's library. And then one matchup where Ulamog isn't great is Control, because they can tuck it with Teferi, exile it with Wandering Emperor, for example. So I wanted to have another creature that was dedicated for control, basically, and that's why I've got Endray's Forerunners here. So Endray's Forerunners might look like a weird choice against control, because there are a lot of other cards that in theory should be better. The first card that I tried against control was Nezahal, because this is a card that is run in other used to be run in other creativity decks, as a way to win the control matchup. And I started out with this card, but it just wasn't that good. First of all, because it's not great against Planeswalkers, especially if they're already on the board. Having this tucked by Teferi is brutal, and quite oftentimes we'll want to Transmogrify when the opponent has Planeswalkers on the board, and Nezahal just doesn't get it done, really, because first of all, like I said, it can get tucked by Teferi. If the opponent has a Narset in play, we don't get to draw cards off this, which means it's basically not going to be able to protect itself. And also, it's very bad at pressuring Planeswalkers now, because I think one of the biggest changes in control decks since Nezahal was good against them was that they're very effective at making chump blocking tokens, either off Shark Typhoon, Wandering Emperor, or Castle Ardenvale. So even if we do get this into play, if the opponent does have something like a Teferi, they can very easily protect it with something like Wandering Emperor. You know, you can't really attack down the Planeswalkers that effectively. And I found that was the same problem with a lot of the other typically good against control creatures that you'd think of, like Koma, Nezahal, for example. So the reason that I've gone for Endray's Forerunners here is because I think there are 3 main things that you need to be good against, like a creature off Transmogrify against control. First of all, you need to be good against Teferi tucking it or Wandering Emperor exiling it. And second of all, you also need to be good against Wrath effects. You know, there is obviously instant speed removal that they can be running as well, like Fateful Absence, but since we're getting this creature off Transmogrify, if the opponent had instant speed interaction, they would probably just use it on the token that you're targeting Transmogrify with, so that's not really an issue. So the thing I really like about Endray's Forerunners is, first of all, if the opponent doesn't have any Planeswalkers in play, this can often just one-shot them and kill them out of nowhere. So it's a 7/7 with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it gives all of our other creatures +2/+2, Vigilance, and Trample. And oftentimes when we do Transmogrify, we will have other tokens in play that we get off Anvil, Fable, or of Nixilis. So if the opponent's shields are down, let's say they've just, you know, tapped out for whatever it is, and we can Transmogrify and Endray's Forerunners, we can often just one-shot the opponent with this by boosting our board and attacking in. If we are behind, though, and the opponent does have Planeswalkers in play, like a Teferi or Wandering Emperor, this can just one-shot it. It can actively kill it, which is one of the main weaknesses of something like a Nezahal or a Koma. You don't get immediate value off it. You don't pressure the Planeswalker, so it gives them, you know, so they have a Teferi in play. Endray's Forerunners can kill the Teferi. Something like a Nezahal, you just have to pass the turn and they can then minus it. So this can immediately pressure Planeswalkers, and the fact that it has Trample also means that it can attack through Shark tokens and the tokens off Wandering Emperor as well. Additionally, the fact it has Vigilance means it can't just get exiled by the Wandering Emperor if they flash it in, because Wandering Emperor can only exile tapped creatures. So I've really liked Endray's Forerunners. It is obviously weak to a Wrath of God effect on the following turn, but the fact you get immediate attack value, and you can either deal a bunch of damage to the opponent, which might then put them in range of dying to Ob Nixilis or Anvil, or you can use it to kill Planeswalkers, just means you get immediate value off it, and you don't have to worry about them just going to Teferi minus or Wrath of God the following turn and you not being able to survive it. So that's why I really like Endray's Forerunners against control. And then the other cards, 4 copies of Thoughtseize. So this is mainly here for the slower decks like Control and Combo. You know, other combo decks like creature-based combo decks like Goblins and the Heliod combo, this is also really nice against. So basically just any deck where we want hand disruption and the 2 life doesn't matter too much. Extra 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern as additional graveyard hate. Very good against Phoenix, Greasefang, You know, Arcanist decks, if they're running a lot of Croxer, this is very good against as well. And the fact that it plays very well with Anvil is also a nice upside as well. And then finally we've got 3 copies of the Meathook Massacre. So this is here predominantly for the aggressive decks as a way to sweep their board. And also just any matchup where we need to gain life. It's also very good against other sacrifice decks to make sure that we don't just get burnt out by Cat Oven. So Meathook Massacre just helps against the aggressive decks a bit more. So anyway, that's the deck. I've been really impressed with it. It's performed really well, and like I said, it could potentially be my pick for the best deck in the format right now. So if you've got any questions at all, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. Now onto the gameplay. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a full 5-match event, so you guys get to see a bit more action. And definitely let me know if you prefer the full 5 matches or if you would like me to keep the videos a little bit shorter. So anyway, let's move on to the gameplay. I hope you enjoy. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Okay, sweet. So we're going first here against the Lurrus deck. Yeah, this looks decent. Turn 1 Terrarian into turn 2 Anvil is always going to be good. Definitely going to lead on the Terrarian here. You know, there is a chance they're playing Arcanist, and they could want to Thoughtseize the Lantern. Oh, okay, they're playing Auras by the looks of it then. It is a bit annoying, but I think we're probably going to have to play Anvil and give them the card draw here, because we want to start digging for either Fatal Push or Transmogrify. Those are the 2 most important cards in this matchup. And getting Anvil online immediately means that they can't just freely attack with this Esper Sentinel, which is important. But yeah, like I said, the whole game plan against Auras here is either Fatal Push their Spirit Dancer, SRAM or Light Pause, or Transmogrify into Emissary, because their only real answer to Emissary game 1 is going to be Helios Punishment, which they typically run in pretty low numbers. So either of those cards should be good. I'm going to attack here. I don't think we want to play Fable because we don't want to give them an extra card if we can avoid it here. So we're just going to attack and then Deadly Dispute during our turn so we can pay the tax. We'll get another token off the Anvil and we get to draw 2 and get a treasure. Drawing Fatal Push would have been really nice there. I think we're going to play Lantern here because we've already played the Sentinel tax. So getting that in play means that we can trigger the Anvil again next turn by sacrificing the Lantern. Lantern, even though they're running Lurrus, isn't typically good against Auras, so that'll definitely be a card we're looking to board out after sideboard here. And yeah, we just gotta hope that we draw Fatal Push or Transmogrify pretty soon. Thankfully, even though we've got a lot of lands, Fable of the Mirror Breaker can help loot those away, assuming the opponent doesn't use a Spell Pierce on it or something. Okay, Arcane Flight is pretty bad. You know, one of the good things with Anvil against Auras is if they don't find a way to give their creature flying or unblockable like Aether Tunnel, we can typically use our token to block on the ground, but since they found the Arcane Flight, that's not really going to work. At least we can stop the Sentinel from getting in for damage. But yeah, like I said here, our whole game plan, we're basically just looking to try and set up to get either Transmogrify or Fatal Push. Okay, another Deadly Dispute is interesting. I think we probably want to lead on that because we want to dig for stuff immediately if we can. Getting Fatal Push would be really nice here. I'm going to sacrifice the Lantern here because I want to keep tokens on the ground to be able to block. You know, if they have a portable hole here or a way to kill one of the tokens, we want to be able to still block this Sentinel and not give them free damage, essentially. Which is why I'm not attacking there. So yeah, we drew up Nixilis, that's not great. We still, all we want to dig for here is Fatal Push or Transmogrify. Because now their core Spirit Dancer has flying, they could close the game out pretty quickly here if they have something like an All That Glitters, or they just have a bunch of Auras here, they could very easily get their core Spirit Dancer up to a 15-15. Now thankfully we still have Anvil as an activation, so we have 16 life because we can activate the Anvil to either sack one of our tokens or sack the treasure to gain a life. But yeah, we just really want to see, like I said, Transmogrify or Fatal Push here. So they're up to a 9/11. Glaring Aegis. Okay, so they're going to tap down one of our tokens, which is pretty important here because it means, you know, if we'd have attacked with one of our tokens, they could have just tapped down the other and then got in for an additional damage with the Esper Sentinel. So they're up to 12 power. I mean, I think we're pretty likely dead here. They have a lot of Auras. You know, if they have a land into 3 more Auras, that's almost definitely going to be enough. If they have All That Glitters, that will definitely be enough as well. So not looking great game 1, but we have a lot of good ways post-sideboard. You know, post-sideboard we have Fatal Push, Transmogrify, as well as Thoughtseize as well. Okay, so they stop at 15. Okay, so we do survive here because we can activate the anvil to gain an extra life. So we do get one more turn to find a Transmogrify or a Fatal Push here. The fact they're leaving open a mana makes me think they probably have a Spell Pierce or Karametra's Blessing. So if we do draw Fatal Push, if they have Karametra's Blessing, we kind of lose. And we do want to try and play around Spell Pierce if we do draw a Transmogrify as well. Oh, maybe they have Karametra's Blessing here. Actually, yeah, if they do, they'll just boost the power of it. Okay, yeah, sweet. So we do lose game 1. Which is a bit annoying, but I'm pretty confident in this matchup. We have a lot of tools to be able to beat them, and like I said, you know, going into game 1 we didn't know what they were playing, so we probably would have mulliganed that hand if we'd known we were against auras. So cuts here, we'll bring in the Thoughtseize and we'll take out Lantern because it doesn't really work that much, and then on Nixilis, it's nice that it creates tokens for Transmogrify, which is important, but typically it's not going to do that much in this matchup. You know, creating 1/1s on the ground doesn't really do much if they give their auras creature flying. And the Punisher effect isn't really going to do much because they can just gain so much life off Staggering Insight if they get that into play as well. So this matchup is all about either getting rid of their creature with Thoughtseize or Fatal Push, or getting Serra's Emissary into play and then closing the game out before they can find an answer to it. So we'll obviously go first here. I mean, we've got Transmogrify, but we have no way to get tokens in play and nothing to sacrifice to Deadly Dispute. This, on the other hand, looks great. We've got Fatal Push and Fable into Transmogrify, so yeah, this hand looks ideal. And I think we'll put back a Pathway here. Having access to Castle Locthwain is nice, so I'll keep the Swamp so that can enter play untapped. Now, that could have been a bit greedy if we drew Anvil here. Okay, Thoughtseize is nice. Hopefully they've only got one creature here. Okay, they've got Spirit Dancer and SRAM, so we'll definitely take the Spirit Dancer because that's definitely the better creature. And then we'll play the Locthwain on tap so that we can Fatal Push the SRAM if they do play it. Because they only have 2 lands, I think they're pretty incentivized to play SRAM here, even though they have Karametra's Blessing. They would need to have drawn a 3rd land for it to be worth holding on to. So they do play the SRAM out. We'll just push the SRAM immediately there. So they're out of creatures already, which is great. And then we'll just slam the Fable here to set up for Transmogrify next turn. And the nice thing is off Fable here is we can both discard to try and hit lands, and we can also get our 4th mana off the Fable attacking. So I think we'll discard Nixilis and the Anvil here just to try and draw for lands. Okay, so I think at this point we're so far ahead that it's not worth just slamming Transmogrify because we do potentially lose to a Spell Pierce here. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably play Nixilis to try and draw out the Spell Pierce if they do have it. Because one way we lose this game is they've just drawn Spell Pierce for turn, and then they just Spell Pierce that, and we're kind of running on empty then. If they draw a creature, we're kind of screwed at that point. Whereas we can actually play around Spell Pierce here by generating an extra treasure next turn off the Fable token. So next turn we can just attack, and then we have 6 mana. Okay. Interesting. I mean, since they miss land drops, I'm actually potentially... I might try and see if I can win without playing the Transmogrify here, just to conceal information. Because from what the opponent's seen so far, we're just a sacrifice deck. If we can win without playing the Transmogrify, I think that then the opponent is much less likely to bring in stuff like Fateful Absence. They're much less likely to bring in additional Heliod's Punishment, which can increase our chances of winning game 3 quite a lot. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so we didn't give away that we're on Transmogrify, which is potentially very useful going into game 3 here. So we'll just run things back. Hopefully the opponent won't bring in extra answers, because against, like I was saying earlier, it's attacking from a completely different front. The opponent isn't likely to bring in stuff like Heliod's Punishment or extra Spell Pierce against just a sacrifice deck, really. They're definitely not interested in Heliod's Punishment, so they might even board that out. And if they do, that basically means that they'll have no way to kill Emissary if we do get it down this game, so I'm pretty happy we could get away winning that one without revealing we're playing Transmogrify. Okay, so going second here. Okay, only 1 land and it's a tap land. We definitely can't keep that. Don't think we can keep that either. We'll have to keep this. A little bit rough we had to mull, but... So I think we'll put back a land and an implement here, I think. and just hope that we draw a way to create a token and then Transmogrify. But like I said, you know, if we do get Transmogrify off, I think we've got a fairly good chance of winning off the back of that. I'm not just going to play Terrarian and draw them an extra card here. We have nothing else going on, so we might as well wait until next turn to play the Terrarian. We just got to hope to draw a Token Maker here. Okay, they've got Saviour. Oh wow, so it looks like they kept a 1-land hand, so I'm very glad we didn't give them the free card there. So I think I'll just play Terrarian and pay the tax here. There is something to be said about maybe using Fatal Push now, but they do have a way to protect the Sentinel, and we'd rather dig for a way to create a creature token while they don't have access to blue mana. Because if they don't have access to blue mana, we can pretty freely Transmogrify to win the game. So I would rather dig for a token maker. Perfect, like Anvil. That's great. So we can get Anvil in play here, and we can't pay the tax unfortunately, but being able to produce a token to Transmogrify with next turn, I feel like should be good enough to win the game. They don't have their second mana, and they don't have access to blue for Spell Pierce either. So we'll activate the Anvil to draw a card and create a token here. And since we've already drawn them a card off the Sentinel, we will use the push here, so, you know, save it using for next turn. I think I'll target the Saviour here. They'd probably sack the Saviour to protect the Sentinel anyway, but I feel it's better to do it that way just in case they have some weird hand that we don't know about where they might want to save the Saviour for something else. Okay, sweet. So there's, you know, they could be running Mana Tithe, but it's so unlikely. I'm just going to fire off the Transmogrify now. You know, if they had access to blue mana and they were holding it open, I'd probably be wary to play around Spell Pierce. But since we have a second Transmogrify, I think we're good to just do this. And we also get another token back. Yeah, sweet. Nice, we got there. Huh, isn't this the same person we just faced? I guess maybe it's similar to Magic Online where they're on their second event, so it queues into the same person again, but if it is, they're probably going to be on Auras again, I imagine. So yeah, they're on Auras, so probably on Auras again. So yeah, this hand looks decent. We've got access to Transmogrify. You know, we don't have early interaction, but we've got a lot of ways to make tokens, and we've got the Transmogrify. So I think game 1, Serra's Emissary is pretty likely for us to get there. We just need to play around Spell Pierce. Okay, so they did on Sentinel. See if they've got a 2-drop to go alongside it. Yeah, okay, so Sram. I mean, thankfully that's probably the least scary out of the 3 of them. So here we'll lead on the Terrarian, sorry, because we don't want to give them an extra card if we can avoid it. Next turn we're probably forced, I don't know. It depends if we draw a land for turn. Ideally we'd want to play the Anvil to not give them an extra card, because we can still get a token for Transmogrify that way. But if we don't draw a land, we might be incentivized to play the Fable. I think we'll still go Anvil here though. We don't want to give them the extra card, and we do get an extra draw off the Terrarian here. So hopefully within the next 2 cards on top of our library we find an untapped land. And we also get a 1/1 immediately to help us block. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so we've drawn a land already. Just got to play around Spell Pierce if they leave it open. If they don't, I think we're pretty good here. You know, the only thing we could lose to if we do get a Serra's Emissary out is Heliod's Punishment, but since we have the second Transmogrify, they would need to have it immediately. Okay, so I'm pretty happy they tapped off their blue mana here, because if they don't play another blue land and leave it untapped, it means we don't have to worry about Spell Pierce, which is really nice. And the really nice thing about Anvil with Transmogrify is, if we do Transmogrify here, we do get another token immediately, which we can then use to Transmogrify with the following turn. So the first one we can get on creature, and to be honest, even if the opponent does immediately have Heliod's Punishment, as long as we survive till the next turn, we can just get a second Emissary out, naming Enchantment, which will cause the Heliod's Punishment to fall off. Okay, sweet. So we're not immediately dead here, which is really good. Not going to block because we want to just use this token for Transmogrify. If we did have to block there, we could still sacrifice the Anvil to make an extra token, but since we don't need to do that, we're better off doing it this way, and then we have a guaranteed way to get another Emissary the following turn, which is nice. So we exile the token, get an Emissary naming creature, and then we also get another token off the Anvil. So they need to have Punishment and kind of win this turn. Okay, sweet, yeah, we got there. So same sideboarding here, bring in the Thoughtseize, cut the Lanterns, and then cut a couple of Nixilis as well. Just trying to think if it's worth keeping in more of Nixilis and maybe trimming an Implement or Terrarian, but no, I think of Nixilis just isn't that good in this matchup, really. Like, it's good at enabling the Transmogrify, but other than that, it's not really going to be doing that much. So, but again, yeah, I feel like this is a pretty good matchup. It's pretty rough for the opponent to queue into us twice. But yeah, since we have Thoughtseize, we have Fatal Push, we have Transmogrify. They do have ways they can fight it, especially Spell Pierce is the thing I'm most worried about. You know, if we keep a hand off the back of Transmogrify, then Spell Pierce is definitely something that can make things pretty scary, but since we have Fatal Push and Thoughtseize as well, it's pretty good. So, I mean, having an Emissary isn't great, but having access to Thoughtseize and Fable to make sure that we find something else good is nice. And even though we have got Emissary on our opening hand, Fable kind of means that we can just loot that away. So they do have two creatures, which is a bit annoying. I think we'll probably take Light Paws here. That's probably the most threatening thing. You know, Spirit Dancer does grow big pretty quickly, but I think the selection that they get off Light Paws is more of a problem. Okay, so they play out the Spirit Dancer here, unsurprisingly. I think we'll just play a tap Blood Crypt, and then we'll have to go Fable next turn and just hope to, you know, ideally we'd want to draw a Transmogrify, I guess. But, I mean, at this point in the game, a Fatal Push would also help a lot. Okay, so they play Arcane Flight and Sentinel. I think even though we're giving them a card, we have to play Fable here, because we need to dig for something. We need to dig for Fatal Push or Transmogrify at this point. Okay, so let's see what the opponent's got here. Staggering Insight. Staggering Insight does mean that we're kind of relying on Emissary. You know, the Anvil side of the deck isn't really going to get it done when they can get such big swings in lifelink. But since we also have Thoughtseize and Fatal Push, I feel like this matchup in general is definitely favoured towards us pretty heavily. Okay, so we'll definitely cycle away the Emissary here, and probably the Blood Crypt as well, because we don't want to be shocking lands in. Okay, nice, we got the Transmogrify here. So we'll attack first just to get the treasure. And then we'll just Transmogrify. And just gotta hope they don't have Heliod's Punishment here, I guess. I guess they could have brought in, you know, some Aura's decks are also running some instants in the sideboard. So we've got to be wary of that. You know, I've come across Fateful Absence in the past. So it can be kind of tricky to know what to name off the second Emissary. But I think typically most Aura's decks are going to be running Heliod's Punishment. Or there's that new, I think it's maybe called Witness Protection? I can't remember. Sweet, yeah, we got that. But yeah, typically you want to name Enchantment off the second Emissary against Auras. Okay, sweet. So going first here. Can't keep this because it's only one land. And yeah, I think we can keep this. So against Kahira, it's almost certainly going to be a control deck, I'd imagine. Thankfully, we get to put Sarah's Emissary back here, which is nice. But yeah, turn 1 Implement into turn 2 Anvil is really nice start here. Implement in particular, you know, even outside of Anvil, is nice against control at sniping Planeswalkers. Okay, yeah, so it looks like we are against control. Definitely play Anvil here. And we'll sack the Implement here, draw a card, drain the opponent for 1 and get a token in play. Now I'd love for the opponent to play a tap land here, because we'd love to play one of our artifacts and then Deadly Dispute. But we don't want to risk Dispute getting countered here, that would be really bad. So I think we're probably incentivized to, well, we'll attack here first. And then I think I'll probably just play Terrarian and then sack it to the Anvil and hold up Deadly Dispute during the opponent's turn, because, you know, if we were going to dispute the Terrarian here, we would want to do it during our turn to get the token off Anvil, but I don't think it's worth risking it getting countered and just sacking it for no value. So we'll sack the Terrarian here, we do get to draw off it, and we get a token and get to drain them again. And then we can just hold up Dispute to sack one of our tokens during the opponent's turn. Because it is pretty important with our current hand that we do dig for something. And like I said, I don't think it's worth running Dispute into a Censor or a Jawari Disruption here. Okay, wow, so they just try and march the Anvil here, and they exile a Helix. So that's great, because it gives us a window to use the Anvil, to use the Dispute, and we get to sack the Anvil for value that would be dying anyway, so... Even though we did lose the Anvil, I think we're definitely pretty up on that exchange, because they did have to sacrifice one of their... Or they had to exile a Helix from their hand, which, you know, can make a difference in a matchup like this, so... They play Stormcloud Coast. Castle Ardenvale is nice for us here because it means that we know they're not on Archmage's Charm. Oh wow, they go Shields down for a turn. Wow, okay, so this is pretty huge. If we can draw like a Transmogrify or an Ob Nixilis off this Deadly Dispute, that would be amazing. So let's see. Okay. So we're flooding out quite a lot, which is a bit rough, but... You know, we're not that far away from hard casting a Serra's Emissary, but against Control, where they've got counterspells, I don't know how likely that is. I'm going to play land untapped here, because I think we're just going to fire off the ley line at the end of the opponent's turn and hopefully draw to something here. You know, it's a bit annoying that we didn't really get to take advantage of them going Shields down that turn. Okay, Iteration, I guess that's kind of good for us, because unless they have a 2-mana counterspell, it means they're kind of Shields down again for this turn. So we've just got to hope to draw something to take advantage of that. Okay, so will they play this tapped or not? Okay, they do play it tapped, so we do get another opportunity to hopefully do something here. So we'll fire off the Implement. We just want to draw like an Ob Nixilis. I guess Fable's pretty good. Getting to resolve a Fable against Control is pretty nice. So we'll attack first here, and then we'll just play a Fable, and we'll run out an Implement here as well. Now again, since we're kind of light on stuff to do here, we probably will fire off Implement. It is kind of nice keeping this up against a Control deck though, because it does give us a way to pick off a Teferi or a Narset after they minus either of those. But since we're pretty light on the ground with threats here that are actually castable, you know, we could attack with the 2/2. Okay, they Wrath of God. I was going to say, we could attack with the 2/2 token, and then we'll have 3 treasures, so we could hardcast the Emissary, but we'd have to get pretty lucky to be able to pull that off, I think. Oh wow, another land. Okay, got another Fable, which is nice. So we'll discard 2 mountains here. Another Emissary. So we're not drawing particularly well this game, but we're still in a reasonable spot, I think. You know, getting Fable of the Mirror Breakers down provides so much value against a deck like Control, so we'll just play the Blood Crypt tapped here and pass the turn back. And now we're, you know, we're threatening 2 Reflection of Kiki Jikis, which they definitely have to deal with. Because if we get 2 down, we can just use 1 to copy the other and win the game. You know, at the end of the opponent's step, we can just make copies of copies. Okay, so they play Teferi. Presumably they plus here, which is going to make it quite difficult for us, because if they have a March of Otherworldly Light to take out the Den, that's pretty rough for us. Wow, they minus on the token. I was not expecting that. Okay, so I presume they have to have March of Otherworldly Light, or Teferi's just dead to Den of the Bugbear here. So we'll get to loot first here, and I think we're going to discard one of the emissaries maybe, or actually no, I don't know. I think we'll hold on to both of them. Lantern's not really doing much here. We want to keep a land for turn, and so I think we'll lead on firing up Den here, because even if they do have March, we have Implement to kill the Teferi. I guess we probably should have played Implement first, just so we can use the 1 red mana off. Yeah, so if we played Implement first, we could have used this red mana to play the Implement, but there's a chance they might not have killed the Den if they saw we have Implement. I don't know, no, I was just probably wrong. I probably should have just played the Implement first and saved a mana here, and then we could have played Terrarian without having to use a treasure. So yeah, I think we'll pass here. Terrarian with 2 treasures does mean that we can hardcast the Emissary though. So yeah, maybe that play last turn will end up mattering. We'll see. Okay, so opponent passes with full mana available here, which is a bit scary. I think I'll probably lead on Fable here, because if they do have a counter spell, that would mean that the mana they have available, they'll basically have less mana available to pump into a Shark Typhoon or something like that. We'll definitely play Terrarian, and I don't think it's worth attacking with the Reflection here because at the end of the opponent's turn we can just copy the other Reflection if they both survive. And yeah, obviously if we had attacked they could have Shark Typhoon or Wandering Emperor to exile it, so they do have the Wandering Emperor, which is a bit problematic, I guess. So the question here is how many copies of Reflection do we want to make if providing both our Reflections survive here, because we definitely want to keep at least one treasure available to hardcast the Serra's Emissary with, but we might not have a wide enough board with Reflections if we don't sacrifice all the treasures. Okay, they play Kahira as well, so I think what we'll do here is we'll make well, hopefully they don't kill the Reflection here, that's the first step. See if they have a Fateful Absence or something. Okay, sweet, they don't. So I think we'll make 3 more copies here and keep 1 treasure available to hardcast the Serra's Emissary. And then that way, if we can get Emissary down, we could name Creature, but then, it's interesting here, because if we name Creature on Emissary, well, I think we'll discard 1 Emissary in a land here. But yeah, if we name Creature on Emissary, it can obviously die to instant speed removal. I feel like if they had instant speed removal, they probably would have killed the Reflection, though. But I don't know if it's worth the risk, really. Okay, Fatal Push, that changes things, I think, because if we go instant now, that definitely gives guaranteed protection against something like a Fateful Absence. And, if we Fatal Push one of their tokens, that means that we have lethal here, I think. So if we go instant, that should give our creatures protection from March of Otherworldly Light or Fateful Absence. The only thing I'm worried about then is Shark Typhoon or another Wandering Emperor, but I feel like I think that's still probably worth it, right? Because they can't, now they're locked out of using any instant speed removal. And even if they have a Shark Typhoon or Wandering Emperor, we put them down to like 2 life anyway, so yeah, we'll just go face here. And even if they block 2 of our creatures, we still have 10 damage here. But yeah, I mean, thinking about it, maybe it was better to name Creature on Emissary, considering if they had instant speed removal, they probably would have used it on the Reflection during their end step. I mean, we got there anyway, but thinking back on it, it might have been better to name Creature instead of instant there. So this is definitely a matchup where we want Enray's Forerunners instead of the Emissary. And we definitely want Thoughtseize in over Fatal Push as well. Lantern isn't great here though. I think we might want to keep in a couple copies of Fatal Push just to deal with the tokens from stuff like Wandering Emperor and Shark Typhoon. Or maybe we want Meathook Massacre to drain the opponent out with Anvil. Actually thinking about it, we probably want Fatal Push, you know. Meathook for X equals 0, you know, we're not running Cat Oven, so it's only really good with Anvil, and it's not that great with the rest of the deck, whereas Fatal Push to kill Wandering Emperor tokens is probably going to come up more often, I'd imagine. So yeah, just thinking back, it probably was better to name Creature on that last game, but I think it was still pretty reasonable naming instant, just in case they did want to hold up counter spells during our turn or something like that. Okay. I mean, we've got Nixilis, but we don't have anything to casualty it with. We have a tapped land on turn 1 or 2, and Implement and Terrarium without Onicult, Anvil or Dispute is a bit scuffed, so I'm gonna mulligan this. This, on the other hand, looks pretty decent. I think we probably want to put back Deadly Dispute, because we definitely want to get the Anvil online here. We want to keep Transmogrify to potentially sneak in and raise Forerunners as well. So lead on the implement here, and then we can Anvil on turn 2, which is nice because we just drew the pathway. Okay, so yeah, we'll play Anvil here. Hopefully they don't have a Sensor or Jari Disruption, but I still think it's worth slamming it here. Okay, they do have a Jari Disruption, which is a bit rough because now we can't casualty this of Nixilis next turn, and we've kind of, you know, even though Implement can be useful, we would have much preferred to get Anvil in play there. Okay, so they're tapping out, which means we get to resolve an Ob Nixilis, which is pretty good. And we do have Implement to be able to pick off that Narset as well, which is nice. Okay, so they have March. We draw another Transmogrify, which is, you know, it's good to have redundancy for that sort of effect, but I am a bit worried if Ob Nixilis dies, we might not have a token for the second copy. So we'll just cast this. Unfortunately, we don't get to casualty it, but still pretty reasonable. I think we'll minus here just to guarantee that we have a token for Transmogrify, because if they play something like a Fateful Absence after we've plussed an Ob Nixilis, we don't have a way to make a token at that point, so... Now, it is a bit annoying that we know they have March of Otherworldly Light, so we can't go for Transmogrify until we either bait that out of their hand or they tap out for something. Okay, the Iteration... I mean, hopefully they tap out. I can't see that happening, though. And I don't think they've activated Narset this turn, right? Maybe they won't activate Narset because they know we have Implement. Oh, well, they do tap out for a Helix. Okay, hopefully they play this tap land, because that... they must have played a land already. So yeah, we get to resolve Transmogrify here, which is huge. So we'll Transmogrify, get an end raise Forerunners, which we can use to immediately kill the Narset. So, you know, this is why I much prefer end raise Forerunners to something like Coma or Nezahol, because, especially Nezahol, if the opponent has a Narset in play, it just does nothing really. And now they need a Wrath of God or Fateful Absence to kill that. March of Otherworldly Light, since Forerunners is 8 mana, they're going to have to spend so much mana to kill it off a March if that's what they're going to try and do. Okay, so I don't think it's worth firing up Den when we know they have a March here. So we'll just attack with the Forerunners first, try and get in for 7. Okay, they cycle away a Sensor. And the other great thing is, since it has Vigilance, they can't Wandering Emperor to exile it, which is great. And then I think we'll play Terrarion. I want to hold on to the Implement here for now, I think. Just in case they play like a Teferi to tuck it. Because that is one of the weaknesses of our board state right now. The opponent could very easily just go Teferi minus on the Forerunners, so we want a way to stop that. Okay, so they did have Wandering Emperor, so Forerunners having Vigilance, pretty huge here. And it having Trample is great. So these kind of two situations are exactly the reason why I love Forerunners, because it's great against Wandering Emperor, it can kill Narset. If they had a Teferi on board, it would have immediately killed that as well. And they can't just chump block with these tokens that Wandering Emperor makes either. Okay, so the Iteration here. Hopefully they don't hit a Wrath of God. I think Wrath of God and Fateful Absence are there only two ways of really dealing with this. Okay, they hit a Triome. Wow, and they plus. Interesting. I would have thought they'd made another token there, maybe. Because even if they have something like a Lightning Helix, that's not enough to kill it. I still think we'll hold on to the Implement here just to play around them having Teferi. So we'll lead by sacking the Terrarion here, I think. Okay, we draw another Implement. I think I'll play Fable pre-combat, just to see if they have a counterspell. Okay, sweet, that resolves. And then we'll just attack down the Wandering Emperor here. Okay, sweet, that goes down. Then I think we'll just play another implement here, and could fire off the first one because we have the second one now, but I think we'll wait, see what the opponent does first, just in case they cast a Planeswalker that we want to hit twice with the implement. So I would quite like them to use March on the 2/2 token here, just so our Den of the Bugbear's live at that point. Okay, they do have a sweeper, which is a bit unfortunate because our only threat, which is the Den of the Bug... Oh, I guess we've got Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but Den of the Bugbear is currently being shut off by that March, which is a bit rough. So here, since we're light on threats, I'm definitely going to fire off one of these implements here just to draw a card and get in for an extra point of damage. Okay, we draw another land. So I think we'll pitch both lands here. Oh wow, okay, Thoughtseize is perfect. Get rid of that March so we can start attacking with the Den. Well, I mean, we'll see what else they have first. If they have a Teferi, we definitely have to take that. Okay, Narset and Shark Typhoon. I mean, they're both cards that we would quite like to take, but I think getting in with the Den is super important here because not only does it start applying more pressure, but it also gives us a token that we can target with the Transmogrify in our hand. So even though Shark Typhoon and Narset are both important cards to take, I think getting rid of the March so we can get in with this attack of Den of the Bugbear is really important here. So we'll attack him with the Den, get a token that we can then target with Transmogrify. Oh wow, okay, they hardcast the Shark, so we just win here then, right? Because we can Transmogrify the Reflection of Kiki Jiki, and then that will put exactly 9 power into play that we can just attack with immediately, right? Oh, 10 power even, my bad, yeah, sweet, so nice, End-Race Forerunner's got us there. Okay, sweet, so going first here. Yeah, can't keep this as one lander. Can't keep a no lander either. That's pretty rough. This, yeah, we can keep this. Think we'll put back an Anvil and probably a Dispute here because we don't really have good ways. You know, we don't really want to be sacking an Anvil to Dispute ideally. But yeah, no, I think that's probably the right play. We'll lead on attack Anuma here. So we're really relying on drawing our third land on time. But Fable should get us out of tricky hands like this, I think. Sentinel. So I think we'll lead on Implement here because we don't want to give the opponent a free card if we can avoid it. So Courtyard into Sentinel is interesting. So it could be humans potentially. We really don't want to see a Thalia here. Hallowed Fountain. Wasn't expecting that. So unfortunately, even though we do get to give the opponent a card here, I think we want to play Anvil here just to start making tokens and sacking, you know, drawing cards as well. Perfect. So we draw a land on turn and we get to play Terrarian since we've played the Sentinel tax already. So Esper with Esper Sentinel could be human still. Thoughtseize. I guess it could be Affinity as well. I originally ran some Esper builds running Herald of Anguish and Blood Fountain, so it could be Affinity maybe. Thoughtseize makes me think it's more likely to be Affinity than humans. I don't think humans would be main decking Thoughtseize, but you never know. Okay, Treasure Vault, so it's almost definitely going to be Affinity here. Fatal Push is interesting, so I think we'll definitely lead with Anvil sacking the Terrarian here. So they do have access to not Mystical Dispute, Metallic Rebuke mana here. So even though we just drew a land, I still don't think it's worth risking just playing a Fable out into potential Metallic Rebuke here. So I think I'll probably just play a pathway, and I'll just fatal push the Sentinel during the opponent's turn. Because it did look like they had Rebuke there. You know, with a full hand, they probably had something else to do with their mana, so I assume they have a Rebuke. I mean, potentially, since they're running Thoughtseize, they might not be also running Rebuke, because that is quite a lot of interaction to run in a synergy-based deck. Volt Scourge, okay. Interesting. And they decided to pay 2, so they definitely don't have access to Rebuke now. Because they tapped out blue mana, so that's good to know. But yeah, we'll definitely take out the Sentinel here. Then we get to resolve the Fable this turn, which is nice. So I think we'll lead by attacking with our tokens here. Very much doubt they'll block. And then we can run out the Fable. We know they don't have Rebuke, which is nice. And I think I'm probably going to hold on to the Hive here just to cycle away with the Fable, because we really want to draw something good, potentially. So we'll also activate the Anvil just to get another token and to drain them for 1. Now Nettlecyst could be scary here because they could put it on the Volt Scourge and start getting in for a lot of life-linking damage. Start swinging the race a bit. But with Fable, you know, we get to dig another 3 cards deeper this turn, so what have they got here then? Khan, okay. So that is kind of problematic here. We don't have a good way to attack it. So we'll definitely cycle both of these away. We'd really like to find... Oh wow, Fatal Push is pretty good. So we'll lead on Fatal Pushing the token here, and then we can start attacking Khan. Oh wow, so they did have Rebuke. Well, we can just pay for that. And they tap down their Volt Scourge as well, so we can guaranteed kill Khan. So yeah, that was a sick exchange for us. I don't know if the opponent just sorry, I don't know if the opponent just didn't clock that we had 3 mana open there. And then Anvil. I'm not sure what to sack here. We could sack the treasure just to apply extra pressure, but I feel with an Emissary in hand and a 2/2 in play, there's a chance that we might get to the point where we can hardcast this Serra's Emissary. So I'm going to sack the creature for now, but I hope that doesn't come back to bite me. I hope we don't end up 1 damage short because I didn't make an extra creature there. But we'll see. Do they have another Khan? Okay, Thought Monitor. Sure. Okay, so they attack with the Volt Scourge. So another Serra's Emissary. So I think I'm going to attack with everything. I think... Oh, maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. Hopefully they don't block... Okay. That is a bit annoying. I was kind of thinking that they would just block one of the 1/1s there. Because now we don't have access to any more treasures. We're not likely to be able to cast the Emissary. If we'd have held that 2... Yeah, it was probably the correct play to hold the 2/2 back. Guaranteed get a 3rd treasure this turn and then cast one of these Serra's Emissaries. So yeah, that was pretty bad play on my part, I think. We should have definitely held back that 2/2. Because when I first attacked, I thought that there would just be no way that they would just trade off 2/2s there, but... Yeah, I don't think that was worth doing. Because now we're kind of stranded with 2 Emissaries in hand. We could still draw a Terrarian to hardcast the Emissary, but yeah, that was definitely the wrong play to do. Okay, so they attack him with a 5/5 lifelinker, which is going to swing the race pretty quickly, I think, but... Oh wow, Transmogrify. Okay, that's a sick draw. So we can Transmogrify... And we don't want to name creature off this one because we want to be able to cop it with Reflection. So I think I'll name instant here. Actually, that was also a misplay. I definitely should have named Artifact there. Because the only real interaction they'll have main deck anyway to kill Emissary is Moonsnare Prototype. And if we'd have named Artifact, it would have also meant they can't attack in with the Volt Scourge to gain life, so... Yeah, we definitely should have named Artifact instead of Instant there. Hopefully it won't come back to bite us. They would need an insane turn here to win, even through that. Or I guess if they have Moonsnare Prototype, they could bounce this Emissary now, and then we'd be completely out of emissaries. So yeah, that was another misplay. We definitely should have named Artifact off that Emissary rather than Instant, because they're not likely to... I mean, they are running black. They could have some creature instant speed removal, but I'd imagine the only thing they have in their main deck to get rid of Emissary now is Moonsnare Prototype, which is an artifact, and also the Vault Scourge, which is their immediate threat, is also an artifact. So yeah, definitely should have named Artifact, but hopefully we can still win through this here. You know, we're still going to be able to get in for... what would it be? 14, 15, for 17 next turn, I think. Okay, they take out the Anvil here. We'll just sack it in response, which will put them down to 1. So, I mean, as long as we can fade Moonsnare Prototype, I think, even though they've got like a 9/9 lifelinker, I think we should still win on the following turn. But yeah, like I said, we should have definitely named Artifact off that Emissary, because we could still copy it with the Reflection, since Reflection is only an enchantment creature. Okay. So as long as they don't have Moonsnare Prototype here, we should win. So we'll name creature off the copy. Yeah, sweet, okay. So even though we misplayed a couple times, we still got there. So, this matchup, definitely don't want Lanterns because they don't really do much here. I think we probably want Thoughtseize in their place, especially because they're running Thoughtseize and Rebuke. You know, them rebuking Transmogrify could be problematic, so I think we probably want all 4 Thoughtseize in here. Probably just going to trim an Nixilis and a Terrarian. Nixilis, you know, it's another matchup where it's good to be able to produce a token to guarantee we can use Transmogrify, but the Punisher effect here isn't going to be that great, especially if they have a Shadow Spear or a Vault Scourge. And their creatures get pretty big, so the 1/1 token it creates isn't going to be able to hold the ground for that long. So, but I still think Nixilis is just generically good, and the fact that it always produces a token we can use with Transmogrify is really important there. But yeah, in general, again, I feel like this is another matchup where we feel pretty favoured. Fatal Push is great at being able to kill their biggest threats, which will be, you know, Vault Scourge, Nettle Cyst token, and the tokens off Karn as well. And then this is another deck that really struggles to beat Serra's Emissary. The artifact decks, you know, the only thing they've got that can really take care of it is Moonsnare Prototype bouncing it, or Otawara, the blue land, bouncing it. But since they're playing 3 colours, they might not even be able to run Otawara in their mana base. And, you know, sideboard-wise, since big creatures aren't really a big threat at the moment, people aren't really prepared for it. You know, the Affinity decks that I built, apart from the mono blue deck with Aether Spellbomb, the sideboards don't really have anything. You know, the only creature removal that the Affinity decks typically run are stuff like Glass Casket and Portable Hole, which isn't anywhere near good enough to take out the Emissary. So getting Transmogrify in this matchup should be good to win, even post sideboard, I think. So yeah, this is a pretty nice hand. We got Thoughtseize, Terrarian, and Implement to go along with the Anvil and Obnix. So yeah, looking like a good start here, I think. We'll see what the opponent has though. Hopefully we don't see Sentinel on 1, because our hand does get pretty punished by turn 1 Esper Sentinel. They obviously have something. I guess Grafdigger's Cage is another card that's problematic for us, because unlike Indomitable Creativity, Transmogrify does actually get shut off by Grafdigger's Cage, because it puts the creature directly into play rather than putting it into play from exile. So the opponent's obviously thinking about something here. Okay, they just passed the turn, so we'll definitely lead on Thoughtseize, see what they were thinking about. Okay, so they're obviously thinking about playing Pithing Needle out here, which I think, to be fair, is probably the card that we have to take. Our hand, our hand even before we drew the second Anvil was pretty reliant on Anvil, so I think we just have to take the Pithing Needle here, because if they name Anvil on Pithing Needle, we'd have been in big trouble there. So they lead on Smith, see what they hit. Oh well, they just whiff. Okay, Transmogrify is great to see here as well. So we can play Anvil out. Terrarian and Implement can help us dig for our 3rd and 4th lands, and then our game plan here is to just Transmogrify on 4 if we can, I think. So they play a Treasure Vault. Playing another Ingenious Smith. Okay, another Nixilis. Oh, okay, they got Portable Hole for Anvil. That's a little bit annoying because if we miss our land for turn here, we probably still just have to play Anvil, which is a little bit rough. Ha, okay, that's brutal. Missing that land drop is really bad because we can play Implement and crack it, but if we miss our land drop, we're in such a bad position at that point. So I think we just have to play Anvil here, and then hope that we can get to Transmogrify before they kill us, because they have got a lot of stats on the board already. You know, they got 9 power in play. Those Smiths are going to get even bigger next turn, as is the Nixilis. So, okay, so we did draw our land, so maybe we would have got paid off more there for playing Implement and cracking it, but... So we'll lead on the Terrarian. Get the 1/1 into play as a chump blocker. So we do have our 4th land here, which is nice. I'm going to play the Implement. I'm going to shock in the Blood Crypt here, which does put us dead on board if they have a Portable Hole. But I mean, if they do have Portable Hole, we're exactly dead to 12 damage, even without shocking that in. So I don't think that should make a difference. If they have Portable Hole, we lose either way. So just gotta hope they don't have it. And this way we'd get to draw an extra card off the Implement, which is pretty huge. Oh wow, they got Thought Seeds. Okay, we're probably in a lot of trouble here then, because if they take the Transmogrify, we just don't have a good game plan to win here. Or we don't have a good game plan to win before they can race us with their big creatures anyway. Oh wow, okay, they do have the Portable Hole. So I mean, even if we hadn't shocked in the Blood Crypt, we would have still lost here. Missing that land drop last turn was really problematic. If we'd have hit that land drop, we would have been able to get another 1/1 in play here. I mean, we still would have lost our... Actually, no, wait, we would have been able to play Transmogrify before they Thought Seized, so... Yeah, it was just unfortunate missing that 3rd land drop there. Maybe we should have just played Implement and tried to dig for that 3rd land instead of just playing the Anvil. But I just felt like if we went for that and we didn't hit a land off the top, that we would be so far behind going into the following turn. So that was a bit unfortunate. Sideboarding though, I think I'm pretty happy with the current configuration. It feels pretty good overall. And yeah, that last game, maybe we're just supposed to just play that Implement instead of the Anvil, because if we miss the next land drop anyway, we're probably dead regardless. So yeah, potentially I probably should have just played Implement and tried to dig for that 3rd land the previous turn. Oh well, we'll see how we do in game 3. So it is a bit annoying that we do have tap lands for our 2nd turn, but we have Implement that we can play on red and crack it the following turn to try and hit our 3rd land. And if we hit our 3rd land drop, you know, we have Fable to help dig for our 4th land and also put tokens into play that we can use to Transmogrify here. So just gotta hope they don't have a Rebuke or Thought Seize for the Transmogrify. Pithing Needle, okay. I mean, I think they're pretty incentivized to name Anvil here. If they name Implement, we could be in trouble, but I think that's kind of greedy, yeah. So they name Anvil, which is obviously good for us. So I think we'll crack the Implement first here, just to see what we draw. Okay, perfect. So we've drawn our lands, so now we're pretty much good to go Fable, and then hopefully Transmogrify when the opponent's shields are down. And like I said, I think that should be good enough to win against Affinity, because they really... you know, they're not going to have that great ways to kill it once it's in play. Okay, so the Ingenious Smith here, so the shields are down. We definitely get to Fable of the Mirror Breaker here, which is great. Fatal Push is also nice to just make sure we don't get run over by Ingenious Smith and Nixilis again. Okay, so they play Treasure Vault. We'd really love for them to tap out here, and okay, they got Portable Hole for the token, which is a little bit annoying. Just trying to think if there's anything in our hand that we actively want to discard to the Fable here. Our hand's pretty good as things stand, you know. Maybe the old Nixilis isn't that great. but even then, you know, it's still pretty solid. So we'll see what we draw here. Anvil. I mean, I think we'll probably just pitch that because we're looking to set up Transmogrify here. So we can Fable here, and then I think I'm just going to pass, and you know, we could Fatal Push during our own turn there, but I think if they have Rebuke, we'd rather they Rebuke the Fatal Push during their turn, and then we're free to Transmogrify. Sky Sovereign. So they do get to kill our 2/2 token, unfortunately, but one of our Fables is transforming into Reflection next turn, and they're tapped out, so we're pretty much guaranteed to get the Transmogrify off here, which is pretty huge. So we'll definitely use Fatal Push on the Nixilis token here. We don't want to take 6 damage if we can avoid it. So we take 3. Now one of the Fables will be transforming into Reflection that we can just use Transmogrify on. Discard Anvil again here because they have Pithing Needle in play. We'll Transmogrify and get an Emissary on creature here. And then the Fable will also be transforming into a Reflection next turn. We've got the second Transmogrify to name Artifact. So they need Moonsnare Prototype this turn, or we basically just win, I think. So they play Thought Monitor. Just trying to think if there's anything else that Affinity is likely to run to kill Emissary in the sideboard. Like I said, Emissary really isn't commonly played right now, so... Okay, they do have Thoughtseize to take out the second Transmogrify, so we're just going to have to hope that this first one is good enough. I mean, thankfully this Thoughtseize will put them below 14... we'll put them below 15, which means that we can kill with Emissary in a 2-turn clock. Oh well, they take the Ob Nixilis. Okay, I was definitely expecting to take the Transmogrify there. In fact, I think playing Ob Nixilis is actively bad here because if they do have a Shadow Spear, if we don't have any Planeswalkers in play, they can't gain any life, whereas if we have an Ob Nixilis in play, they can attack the Ob Nixilis and gain life, so I wouldn't really be wanting to play Ob Nixilis on this board anyway. You know, typically if you've locked the game down with an Emissary, if the opponent can get lifelink, you don't want to play Planeswalkers out anyway, so... Okay, so they attach Nixilis to the Thought Monitor, but they can't really attack here because of the Emissary, so I don't really know what that achieves. Okay, so we drew the second Emissary. Thankfully we've still got one in the deck still. I'm going to attack first here just in case they do have something weird. You know, if they have some like card like Fading Hope, we want to be able to get the second Emissary naming creature. Okay, so I assume they have Metallic Rebuke here. But if they don't, we should just lock the game out here. Yeah, okay, so they do have Rebuke for the other Transmogrify. I guess that makes sense why they took the Ob Nixilis if they had an answer for Transmogrify, but they need Moonsnare Prototype this turn to win. Yeah, okay, nice, we got there. Okay, sweet, so going first here. Yeah, this hand looks decent. So against Gigantha, I think I've played this person before and they were on Niv. Seeing Gigantha again makes me pretty confident they're on Niv, so... Yeah, this hand looks pretty decent. Lantern on 1, we got Anvil, which we can use the Lantern to trigger. We got Dispute as well, so... Okay, so lead on Thoughtseize. So even though Gigantha could be red-black mid-range, since I've faced them before and they were on Niv, I'm pretty confident just using Dispute to sack the Lantern here because, you know, typically if I thought they were if I was against red-black mid-range, we'd want to keep Lantern in play to deal with a potential Croxer, but I'm fairly confident they're on 5-color Niv here. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so we definitely want to get Fable of the Mirror Breaker into play here. And then pass. And this is definitely a matchup where we want to start applying pressure pretty early on because they do have a pretty good late game. Okay, so they do have Croxer, even though we looted away the Lantern. But we do have a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, so I'm not too bothered about that. So here, since we're going to be looting away the lands likely anyway, I'm happy to just pitch the Implement to save ourselves the 3 damage here. Because Hive, Castle Lochthwain and the Implement are all kind of cards that we're probably going to be looting away here. Okay, Haunted Ridge is nice because it means we can attack with the Hive here. We could pitch the Fatal Push and hold on to Castle Lochthwain in case it does go down to top decking. But having said that, I think Push is important to keep in case the opponent has a Territorial Carvu. Because we really struggle to beat that card otherwise. Okay, so we'll play an untapped land here, and we'll fire up Hive of the Eye Tyrant to deal with the Croxer here. And the treasure basically just replaces itself off the 2/2 anyway, which is great. And then I think since we're kind of out of gas here, I want to use the treasure to play for Terrarian because we can't cycle the Terrarian the turn we play it because it enters play tapped. So I'd rather get it in play now. We have the Haunted Ridge in hand to fire up Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and then we can just crack the Terrarian next turn to draw a card. Ha, Croxer, okay. I mean, we kind of have to discard the Fatal Push here because we need the Haunted Ridge to exile that Croxer with Hive of the Eye Tyrant next turn. Oh, okay, they got us, damn. So if we'd have held on to the Terrarian, we could have pitched the Terrarian to Croxer, had Haunted Ridge to fire up the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and had Fatal Push to kill the Carvu here, which would have been perfect. So we're getting punished for playing the Terrarian, but with the information we had during that turn, I still think it was probably the right play to play it out. But we would have been in a better spot if we had Fatal Push still, because we could have attacked with a 2/2 as well, and then before they block, we could have killed the Carvu with Fatal Push. Ha, Teferi. Now they have the Carvu back to protect the Teferi, so I hope that doesn't end up costing us. But like I said, in the moment with the information we had, I still think it was probably right to play Terrarian there. Ha, so this is a difficult turn because we obviously need to feel like they're not low enough on life that we can ignore the Teferi here, so we definitely need to start attacking it. We would love to have an extra land here, so I think I'm going to start off by cracking the Terrarian, because if we hit an extra land here, we can fire up the Hive and copy the 2/2 here, which is potentially, you know, if they don't have instant speed removal, that will kill the Teferi. So we'll fire up the Hive, and then we'll copy the Reflection. We'll copy the 2/2. Now again, this is kind of sketch against instant speed removal, because they could either kill the Hive, or they could kill the 2/2 in response to the Reflection. I think we have to go for it though. We have to just pressure the Teferi any way we can, or that will just run away with the game. So I think if they're going to use removal, I would rather them use it on the Hive here, because we get 2 tokens off the 2/2s we make here. Okay, so they do Helix the Hive, which out of the 2, you know, obviously we'd prefer them not to have removal, but as things stand, I'm actually happier it went this way, because they'll presumably block the 2/2 token with the Carvu. But we'll get 2 treasures here, and we can sack whichever 2/2 they block, presumably the original one, with Deadly Dispute here. Oh wow, they blocked the copy. I mean, I assume they just couldn't tell which one was which, because I don't think there's any reason not to block the original one there. But either way, we get to Dispute here. Hard Transmogrify is interesting. So yeah, I'm very glad that we started attacking Teferi there rather than face, because that Helix would have made it basically impossible for us to race here, and Teferi is just going to run away with the game otherwise. Okay, so play the Celestus. Tap Triome. Okay, so the fact they didn't put Gigantha into hand is a bit suspicious. So this is a tough turn. I definitely think Transmogrify is way too risky here. While they have all that untapped mana. So I think I probably want to lead on Fable of the Mirror Breaker here. And see what they do about that. Because we could go Fable, we can try copying the new 2-2. And then, well, we'll see what they do once we copy the 2-2 first. Yeah, there's a lot of options here, and they could have. The annoying thing about Niv is they have so much different types of interaction, you never really know what they have. Oh wow, they cycle Ketria Triumph. Oh wow, okay, and it looks like they don't have priority anymore, so it looks like they don't have anything. So we'll attack Teferi first here. We get 2 treasures, which means we can Transmogrify here, which is huge. Okay, it looks like they realised which one's the original. Yeah, so they blocked the original one. But again, that shouldn't really matter here, because we're going to Transmogrify the other one anyway. So, I mean, they could have Fatal Push, theoretically, but Arena is giving away that they don't have anything, because it's just passing priority immediately. So we'll Transmogrify here. And against Niv, Emissary is really tough to know what to name, because they do have Maelstrom Pulse as a sorcery. Here, I'm going to name Instant, though, I think. They could have Maelstrom Pulse, they could have Vanishing Verse. I think it's better to go for Instant here, because if they don't have instant speed removal, they might try and dig for it off Teferi and other draw spells. And to make the information, you know, I think it's better, well, it's higher upside to go for instant. Oh, they got Niv anyway, but it's higher upside to go for instant, because if it's sorcery speed removal they have, then they kind of have to do it immediately. Whereas if it's instant speed, if they pass the turn to our turn, we know the coast is clear, and we can copy the Emissary to win here. So they've got Vanishing Verse, they've got Binding of the Old Gods. Vanishing Verse they can't use because Emissary has protection from instants, and they don't have enough mana to play Binding the Old Gods. They also, since they played a tapped Triome, they can't play Deafening Clarion here, which is huge for us. So the fact that that tapped land came into play tapped was huge, because if they'd been able to Clarion, we wouldn't have been able to copy the Emissary during our turn. So if they just pass the turn here, I'm pretty sure we just win here, because we can copy the Emissary with the Fable, with the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, make another copy of Emissary, naming creature, and just attack. And even if they have instant speed removal, all of our stuff has protection from it, so it shouldn't matter what we discard here. We can just copy the Emissary. There's nothing they can do about it, because any interaction they have will be instant speed, and we have protection from instants. And then we can just attack. So yeah, the fact that that last land of theirs was tapped basically won us the game, because they could have Clarioned and killed our Reflection and token there. Okay, sweet, we got there. So that was close. Niv is probably the worst matchup for this deck that I've come across so far. So here we definitely want Ulamog over Emissary. Emissary is really tough to know what to name, because they have such varied removal. We definitely want Thoughtseize. Lantern isn't great. And I'm willing to trim 1 Fatal Push. I want to keep 3 in though, because being able to kill Territorial Kavu with Fatal Push is really important. And I think we'll just trim a Terrarian. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, Ulamog is kind of our trump card in this matchup, because the vast majority of their interaction, the only card I can think of that can even interact with Ulamog from their deck is the 4-mana Teferi, which we did see that last game. We know they do have it in their deck, but I can't imagine they have that many copies of it, to be honest. And so, since they don't kill particularly quick, like they can kill quickly if they get Territorial Kavu down, but we do have stuff like Anvil to be able to block that. But if we can get Ulamog down early in the game, and they don't have the 4-mana Teferi, which again I can't imagine they're running as more than a 1 or 2 of, then Ulamog can just win the game on its own, which is huge. Okay, perfect. So we've got Thoughtseize to try and clear the way for Transmogrify. Like I said, if we can get down an early Ulamog, as long as they don't have that 4-mana Teferi, we should be good. Okay. So we definitely want to take Clothis here. That is one of the best cards against us. Okay, they play a Triome. We'll just play 2 Terrarians here, and then we can play Fable to try and set up for Transmogrify next turn. Okay, they do have Carvu. So I think we'll leave. We'll lead on cracking the Terrarians here, because even though they have Culling Ritual, I mean, it would kill their Carvu for a start, but it does. Even if they use Culling Ritual when we have Terrarians in play, we would still get the card draw off it. But I would rather sack them now, because if they do Culling Ritual, they'll kill the 2 Terrarians and we'll get to draw, but they'll also get an extra 2 mana off their Culling Ritual from that, so I'd rather crack them now than give them the extra mana that they get off Culling Ritual. Okay, so they Bloodchief's Earth the token, which means we can't just Transmogrify next turn, which is a bit rough, and we're also taking the 5 damage, so it's huge that we managed to get rid of Clothis here, because if they have Clothis plus Carvu attacking us, that's actually really hard for us to beat, even if we had something like an Anvil in play. Okay, sweet. So we got Anvil here. So, what do we want to discard here? We definitely want to keep Anvil. We definitely want to keep Implement of Combustion, because we want to start making tokens off Anvil to be able to Transmogrify, I think. And we definitely want the Blood Crypt and the Transmogrify, so we might just discard 2 Deadly Disputes here, which feels a bit weird, but I think everything else in our hand is too important here. Maybe we don't need to discard 2, but I also kind of want to hit a Fatal Push to deal with the Carvu here. Interesting. Okay, so I think we want to go for Anvil rather than another Fable of the Mirror Breaker here. Even though we know they have Culling Ritual, I would rather they tap out to play the Culling Ritual so that we can then Transmogrify next turn. Because if they tap out for Culling Ritual, they will get mana, but it will go at the end of their turn, and that will leave them tapped out. We want them to tap out this turn, because then, like I said, Fable will turn into Reflection, and then we can Transmogrify into Ulamog. And on this board state, even though we're at 14, I imagine that should be good enough for us to win here. Okay, so they exile from Graveyard, which is not a good sign, because it means they don't have anything in their hand they want to discard, so their hand must be pretty stacked. Oh wow, another Carvu. Okay, so that transforms. I'm going to pass to see if they have priority. Okay, so Arena's telling me they don't have anything, so we'll just definitely go for the Reflection here. Get an Ulamog down, and now we'll also be able to trigger the Anvil here. So as long as they don't have the 4 mana Teferi, we should be good to win here, I'm pretty sure. Because we can keep making tokens to stop. You know, they're not going to attack this turn because of the Ulamog. Oh, come on. That's rough. I'm pretty sure if they don't have that Teferi, we would just win the game there. Now we're in real trouble. So we have to block this. We can't afford to take 10 damage, because that just puts us in range of 2 Lightning Helixes. We're only going to be able to make 1 token off only Cult Anvil next turn, and I feel like we have to attack Teferi down as well, because our game plan of Ulamog isn't going to work if they just have a Teferi sitting on the battlefield. Okay, Fatal Push, that's a pretty huge draw, I'm not going to lie. So we'll lead on attacking with the Hive here to kill that Teferi, so that if we do draw another Transmogrify, they can't just bounce it. Then we'll play Blood Crypt untapped to be able to Fatal Push their Carvu, and then I think we have to crack the Anvil here just to get an extra blocker in play. But yeah, them having that Teferi was rough there. Again, I don't know how many copies they're running. They could be running multiple. Okay, Clarion with Lifelink. Again, that's even more rough, because now we're kind of reliant on the Ulamog game plan. Because our deck basically is Anvil or Transmogrify, and if they're going up to, what, 22 life here, I very much doubt we're going to win through the Anvil side of the deck, so at least we've killed that Teferi, so if we do hit another Transmogrify, we've got a chance of winning. So here I think we have to just go Fable, and I mean I assume they probably have some instant speed removal, and our only game plan of or our only shot of winning there is using Deadly Dispute on the token in response to their removal and hoping to hit a Fatal Push. Okay, so they have Vanishing Verse, so we have to just hope to hit a Fatal Push here then, I guess. We did have another Transmogrify, but yeah, that's not going to be good enough for us to win. They just attack with the Carvu and win here. So that was kind of unfortunate. Yeah, just them not having that 4-mana Teferi would have been good enough for us to win, I'm pretty sure, but... And I mean, it could be worth looking at another creature that dodges Teferi as well, but there's only so much interaction you can dodge, and also, from what I've seen, I feel like most builds of Niv either aren't running any copies of that Teferi, or they're only running one copy. So here, I think I'm going to go up to the full 4 copies of Fatal Push, because not having a Fatal Push for Carvu was pretty rough there. And I'm just going to trim an of Nixilis to make room for it. So yeah, having Fatal Push for Carvu would have been pretty important that game, so I'm going to go up to the 4 copies again. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's worth making changes to the deck, because most of the Niv lists I've seen don't run that Teferi in very high numbers. And to be honest, overall, I think the Niv deck isn't super popular right now anyway, so I think Ulamog is still pretty good for the most part. So this hand, I don't think we can keep because we have no red mana. This hand looks great though. We've got Anvil, Transmogrify, Ob Nixilis, and we can obviously put the Ulamog back into our deck as well. Okay, so they lead on a tap land. We get to resolve the Anvil here, which is great. And then we can go Ob Nixilis next turn as well. And we could... okay, they got Carvu. I was going to say we could crack the Anvil to try and casualty the Ob Nixilis here. But I'm not sure if that's better than just casting the Ob Nixilis normally. Probably not. So I'll go Ob Nixilis and then minus. If they have a removal spell for the 1/1, then we can still crack the Anvil to its own ability to create a token to Transmogrify. So hopefully, like, you know, we're kind of baiting them into using a removal spell on the 1/1 and then attacking the Ob Nixilis. Okay, so they do tap out here. I very much doubt they're going to have a single colour removal spell here. Like, they're not going to be running on the Holy Heat. So I think the coast is clear again for us to Transmogrify here. We've just got to pray that they don't have that Teferi again. Okay, so they pitch a Culling Ritual. I guess with Carvu in play that makes sense. Okay, Fatal Push is a nice draw here, but yeah, we're just going to crack the Anvil. And again, Arena's telling us that they don't have anything because it's passing priority. So yeah, we get a very early Ulamog down, which is great here. We've just got to really hope they don't have the Teferi here. So they got 48 cards in deck, so that is 3 attacks, but... Oh no. That is brutal. Okay, so that is unfortunate. We can attack the Teferi down with our Den of the Bugbear, and we do have Fatal Push for the Carvu as well, but we're kind of out of steam here at the moment, which isn't great. So again, I think the priority here has to be killing the Teferi, because we're not going to get another chance while they're tapped out. You know, if we wait a turn, if we Fatal Push the Carvu here and then try and Den when they have open mana, they're just almost always going to have a removal spell for the Den. Okay, so this isn't looking good. Clothis plus Carvu is a really fast clock. It's very difficult for us to beat Clothis, so not looking great this game. I mean, we do have the Fatal Push to kill the Carvu, and we do have Den of the Bugbear to start racing back, so it's not completely game over. I think we do have a chance, but we need them to have not much in hand, basically. So we put them down to 8. I mean, they're down to 8 already. They are going to be gaining 2 life a turn, though, but our hand is very weak, so we have to really rely on them not having much here, I think. Okay, they're Clarion 2 tokens away. That's not the best thing. So the fact they didn't put Gigantha into hand is a pretty strong sign that they probably have instant speed removal, and I feel like losing Den here is really problematic, so I think I'm just going to pass and not attack here. Because if they had a Helix on our Den, that's really rough. Oh, okay. Thinking about it, that was probably... Actually, yeah, I definitely played that turn too quickly. I should have attacked because I think we're at the point now where we're not beating instant speed removal, and we're also just dying to this Clothis anyway, so that missed attack could cost us the game here if the opponent doesn't have much going on. So we'll crack the Terrarian here. That was frustrating. I definitely should have attacked there. Okay. I mean, I think we have to Thoughtseize here because we can't afford to let them play Gigantha here. Wow, they only had Culling Ritual. Yeah, so I think missing that attack with Den of the Bugbear last turn is going to be pretty bad because, I mean, how's this race going to work out? They were at 8. They would have been at 4 if we'd have attacked last turn, and we'd have had an extra 1-1 in play. So what, how many turns do we need to kill? We need 3 turns to kill them. Yeah, so I think missing that attack a couple of turns ago with Den might end up just costing us this game. Okay, so we've got the Fatal Push for the Carvu, but I still don't think we can really race here, unfortunately. Anvil, okay. So that will put us up to 4, but we're still dead in 2 turns here, and that's not good enough considering they have Culling Ritual. So we can either play the Anvil and crack it now to put us up to 4, or we can hold on to it, but then we need Anvil and... We'd need to draw Anvil and an artifact, but then we wouldn't have enough mana to activate Den as well. I think we have to Anvil now, and then immediately activate it and hope to draw another Anvil the following turn to put us out of range. I think that's the only way we're winning this race now, because they have Culling Ritual. Because if we just play Anvil here, they'll Culling Ritual it, we won't get any value if we don't activate it. And if we hold on to the Anvil to hope to draw an artifact the following turn, then we don't have enough mana if we play Anvil plus artifact to then animate the Den of the Bugbear. So yeah, this is so frustrating, because if they don't draw anything this turn, then we would have... Okay, they Culling Ritual. Let's see if they've got anything. Wow, they don't. This sucks. Because, we put them down to 2. Yeah, so we would have won if we'd have attacked a few turns ago with the Den. And now we just died to the Clothis. So yeah, that kind of sucks. We did punt that game, but 4-1 overall is still pretty good. And this would have been a 5-0 had I not punted that last game by missing the attack with the Den. But yeah, overall, you know, when you don't punt with the deck, it has been performing super well for me. I've only lost twice so far in these events, so the deck has been performing really, really well for me. And I definitely recommend trying it if you like Sacrifice and combo as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the games. Bit of a shame I punted that last one, but yeah, hope you enjoy.